Hi there.
How are you?
Hi there, everybody. I'm sorry we're a little bit late. Technology continues to be what it is. Welcome to our second edition of the Making Change Hangout. My name is Hilda Gottlieb. I'm with Creating the Future, and it is my honor and privilege to introduce the three women that you see on the screen today. Today we're going to be talking about planning and strategy that creates the future of your community. And if you are watching in our community-focused blog, welcome, and please tweet any questions, comments, thoughts, ahas that you have to the hashtag CTFuture, and you can see it up on the screen there, and we're just really glad you're here. So I'm going to quickly introduce you guys, but I think that the substance of what you talk about is going to introduce you better than I ever could. I'm going to read a little bit from your bios because you guys are pretty amazing and I don't want to miss anything. I want to start with Gail Valerius. Gail has been a passionate advocate for social justice, global development movements, and social inclusion for immigrants and racialized people in Canada for 30 years. I just like saying that. So I just wanted to read that because I just like saying that. For the past decade, Gail has been consulting and teaching leadership and governance and strategy and community development all over the continent. And she is a fellow at Creating the Future, a faculty member at Creating the Future, and I'm just really, really glad you're here. So wave and say hello.
Hello. Thank you very much for letting me be here.
We're really, really happy. I will go next to Kate because you are sitting next to Gail there. Kate Bishop's career has been in the nonprofit and public sectors all across Canada. Right now she is holding the position of Supervisor of Community Engagement at the City of Guelph. But one of the things that she's going to be talking about today is two volunteer activities that she's done. As board member, as volunteer, as coordinator, as chief cook and bottle washer. One of them at the Guelph Neighbourhood Support Coalition, and in addition, she was on the board of the AIDS Committee of Guelph and Wellington. So I know that you're going to be talking about that. And Kate, if you want to just wave and say hello.
Hi, everybody. Great to be here.
Great, great, great to have you here. And lastly, but not leastly, Karen Smith. Wave and say hello, Karen.
Hello.
Hey. Karen has been a consultant in the community benefit arena for about 25 years until she fell in love with an organization called the Community Child Abuse Council in Hamilton, Ontario, and went inside to be an executive director, which is just such amazing work that you guys are doing, and I'm really, really honored that you're here. So we've got folks from across the sector and across the public sector and the community benefit sector talking about planning and strategy that actually creates the future. So Karen, wave and say hello.
Hello, everybody. Nice to be here.
Nice to have you. Nice to have you guys. I want to start out by just sort of framing a little bit and then sort of go into, just immediately dive into questions. Pretty much anybody watching here is watching because they're interested in planning and strategy, and I'm going to say pretty much everybody has what the norm is in their head. We do a lot of research before we do planning. We gather a lot of data. We do an environmental scan. We look at what's going on in the community so that we can really root our plans in the reality of today so that we know what's going on. We may do a visioning exercise, so sometimes we picture a newspaper article 20 years from now. If you were successful and you won an award, what would it look like? We do those kinds of exercises. And then we jump back into today and say, okay, now with all of that solid data and all of that vision for what's possible, what do we want to do over the next couple of years? And I think that's pretty much how most of us have experienced planning over time. What we're going to be talking about today is just a little bit different take on that, and I'm really looking forward to the experience that you guys have had. Gail has led the kinds of planning sessions and strategy sessions and thinking sessions that we're going to talk about today, and both Kate and Karen have been involved on boards and in committees that have been experiencing that and have worked with that. So I'm just really looking forward to you guys sharing your experience today. So let's dive in. with the very, very first question. And again, I'm going to warn you guys that I'm going to have to be the timekeeper today. So as we're going along here, I may cut you off just so that we can get into another question, because as we've discussed between us, an hour is barely enough time to scratch the surface on a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about. So it'll be fun and fast-paced. Let's just start with the first question of what does planning look like when it is aimed at making the biggest possible difference in a community? What does it look like?
Well, I'd be happy to start by saying that my experience has been that people seem to experience something akin to joy and inspiration when they are able to include community members, and sometimes actually great surprise, but inspiration for sure when they're hearing from their community what is most important about what they do.
And I would add in that in my experience, it's a bit of a lengthier process to be involving community, because it often takes several go-arounds to get everybody on the same page. You also have to go where people are, and you have to stay with where they need it to be. So that might take, people might not be at different points in understanding the process or where people want to get to. So it takes some time getting everybody on the same page. Diverse opinions and experiences do that. And it also requires, I think, leadership that is very, very involved and responsible for the process. It's not the kind of leadership where you just show up at a meeting. You're very much involved in directing and thinking about how you want things to go and where you think it needs to go, and listening to each other.
I would just add, in my experience, Hildy, the planning that you're describing and that we're talking about today, it felt like no other planning I had ever done. And it didn't really feel like anything that I knew as planning. It felt more like I was part of a journey with the people I was doing it with. Planning, for me, had always been something like charting and mapping, and and then you kind of hand that over to the captain of the boat or the crew of the boat, and off they go. This was more like everybody climbing on the boat, grabbing an oar, and figuring it out. It is a process as much as it is anything else. And it was really it was ripe with experience. It was as much about how it felt as about what it accomplished. I think that it because it was about having that highest possible impact, greatest impact on community, we were constantly talking about the community, thinking about the community, collecting information about the community, and adding that into the mix of what we would previously have considered in our planning, which was a lot of internal stuff, and that made it a rich soup. So for me, it was very, it felt very different. It involved, as Kate said, maybe a lengthier process, but certainly for us anyway, a much richer, more robust process, one that we really felt we were all in together. And so that meant taking risks together, monitoring our progress together. It was kind of, we're all doing it. It wasn't a plan that gets handed off. It wasn't a plan that becomes somebody else's problem. It wasn't governance and operations. It was all-encompassing, and I can't imagine now doing it any other way.
So Karen, what do you think, and I'll ask Kate as well, what do you think led to it feeling different?
Well, I stepped in to the role here at the Child Abuse Council as executive director at a time when the organization was just about to celebrate their 35th anniversary. a lot of history, and you know, things get done. It's a lean and mean machine, and you know, it's a professional team. Everybody knows what they do, and having come out of the consulting world, where I had learned about some of these other ways of thinking and approaching and planning, I was asking different questions, and I think the time was right for the board at the organization at the time to hear those questions and go, oh. And I think it was that conversation and that level and type of engagement with board members, first and foremost for me, that was very different. I went from a place of real frustration as a consultant around, you know, seeing organizations struggle, seeing them suffer because of limitations, never having enough of whatever, to asking, once I connected with Creating the Future, and once I started hearing what the questions could sound like and how they could be different, and what this community impact approach could aim for, that was different, it changed that relationship. And I think that for me personally as well as professionally, that was at the heart of it. I could list a bunch of other things, but I really think that's what set the tone and the tenor for what was to come. It's a very empowering thing when it happens all around the table. So myself and the staff team and the board members, it can be it can feel very risky when it's not all around the table. So what I love about the process we went through and the questions we were asking was that it was very much a shared experience and a journey that we did together. So if it felt risky for everybody. And if we were celebrating, we were all celebrating. And if everybody was scratching their heads, well, that was okay too. We were all doing it.
Well, you know, it's interesting as you're talking about the relationships, and Kate was talking about that it's that deep involvement of community that makes it different as well, which is when you both mentioned that it takes longer, but relationships take time. So it's interesting that we would like the shortcuts, and we'd like to have the relationship. We'd like that all at once, and we'd like it in about 20 minutes. And that's not how life happens. When you guys look at what you've accomplished through your planning, what does that kind of planning make possible? What kind of results have you seen? What kind of shifts have you seen from the plans that you've been involved with? And I guess Gail is pointing over at Kate there. So.
Okay, well, I can speak for two different community organizations. One with the AIDS Committee of Guelph Wellington. We became as a board far more focused on what we were doing out in the community instead of having our board meetings, and that would be it. How we were out there supporting the staff to be involved in community events. They were our events. We at the Guelph Neighbourhood Support Coalition, I can give you really concrete results, Hildy. When we worked with Gail in 2011, 2012, the organization hadn't been incorporated as a nonprofit. And we became incorporated in September of 2012. And at that time, we had 11 members of neighborhood groups that were part of the Guelph Neighborhood Support Coalition in 2012. In 2014, we have 14. In 2012, we had 8 partner organizations that were official members. We now have 10. Here's where it gets really exciting. The number of annual funders other than the City of Guelph was 5 in 2012. We now have 12 other funding organizations that are supporting the Guelph Neighbourhood Support Coalition. And in 2012, those 5 additional funders brought in $128,000. We have now, at the end of 2014, brought in $290,000, so almost $300,000, so more than double what we were 2 years ago. So those are the kinds of concrete examples I'm so excited about. I just figured those out recently. But I think the broadest number of people and getting our message out to as many people as possible and involving as many people as possible in our planning process has increased our confidence, and people see our organization as being really confident and they want to be part of it. And that, frankly, in 2011, Gail, was our dream, that in 5 years everybody would be banging down our door to be part of the Guelph Neighbourhood Support Coalition, and it's starting to happen. So we're really excited.
I got to tell you a little story about one of those, the board that Kate led that did the plan with the coalition. The first meeting, there were people sitting at the table who weren't really sure. There was the chief of police, and there were neighborhood women, and there were, professionals from various agencies, and they kind of sat there at the table like, I was one of the women in particular. I remember her sitting with her arms crossed, and it was like, I dare you to make this work. And by the end of the planning process, well, one day, I'd love to tell this story of a group of people at the end of the planning session. It was 10 o'clock at night. Everybody needed to go home, of course. And as I was pulling my car out of the parking lot, there was Kate and the chief of police and a couple of other people standing in the doorway of the building that we had been in. And they were just like, grrr, they were talking and excited, and oh my God, and the hands were flying. And I rolled my window down and I said, what are you guys talking about? And they said, we can't stop. There's so many possibilities. There's so much great stuff going on here. And so, of course, we all laughed and joked. And, these guys came together every 2 weeks for 6 months. They were so excited about the planning work that they were doing.
Now, what do you attribute that to, Gail? Is it the fact that they were all together, or is it what they were talking about?
Oh, I think it's a lot of different pieces. They found each other. They found a kinship with each other during that process. It was obvious to watch. They also got so inspired. One of the things we did was we started telling stories. They shared stories around the table of various awesomes that were happening in neighborhoods. And again, you could just feel things start to click as they realized they have so much to work with together.
If I could add, though, Hildy, I think it went very quickly from a group of people that were very unsure about whether or not this could even happen, and a lot of fear.
When you say this could happen, what is the this?
Creating an independent organization that would support, at that time, 11 different neighborhood groups in Guelph, because it had been tried in different ways for about 15 years in the city of Guelph, with many of the same players that were around the table with their arms folded that Gail was talking about. And it had never really gotten off the ground. And people didn't think that there was never enough money, there was never enough time, there was never enough there were staff, trust, all of those things. And I think what Gail did for that group was to shift that, and it's as Karen was saying, just a whole different way of looking at moving forward and doing it together, and getting rid of the fear, and instead of focusing on fears, thinking about, okay, but this is where we want to be. And so I think we looked a lot at, well, we've already got a lot of great things happening. We've got a lot of great things in place. And Gail helped us to see that and recognize that instead of dwelling on the negative.
Karen, what was your experience? I love when you said, Kate, that rather than looking at the fears, you were looking at where you wanted to be. And it sounds like, because this is a group of neighborhood coalitions, that sounds like these are not professional non-profit-y sorts of people. It sounds like you've got some real neighborhood people at the table there.
All volunteers, Hildy.
Right. Talking about the community, and I love when you said, rather than focusing on the fears and what's wrong, that they were focusing on where they wanted that community to be. Karen, what was your experience with that? Is it similar? Is it different?
Certainly a lot of similarities. I think for us, and I would pick up on what Kate said about the leadership piece of this. So Gail facilitating this process was invaluable because she made sure that we had those important touchstones that were always there. So what is highest potential? Asking the right questions, and what will that take? And what if that happens? And what if that's not true? And all of the pieces that really kept us firmly focused. But I think what happened for me, and I think a lot of board members have expressed something akin to this, it takes up a space in the room. It becomes a part of what you're doing. And what I mean by that is, so we were an organization 35 years of a vision of a community free of child abuse, and a mission that said we were going to reduce the incidence rate and the impact of child abuse in our community. And, you know, it's not hard to get, without intending to, complacent. You know, every time we provided clinical treatment for a child, we were theoretically helping reduce the impact. Not theoretically, we were reducing the impact. Certainly on that child, probably on a family, maybe on a neighborhood. But you can get very caught in what you're actually accomplishing. And fast forward to the end of the process, where the board embraced a vision that said, well, you know, a community free of child abuse would be nice, but our highest potential is actually based on our belief that thriving children create thriving communities. And that's where we went. So it took it, you know, from something that had been for 35 years pretty awesome to the stratosphere. And to that end, our mission is, you know, all the programming that we offer, including the treatment and the education and the prevention work that we're doing, all lines up now under that vision of thriving children. And so now when we think about, when the board asks questions about what they could be doing and what could we be aspiring to and what could we be accomplishing that we're not already accomplishing, the potential answers and how exciting and engaging they are has been ramped up times 10. And our ability to recognize the really good stuff that we were already doing and apply it to something even better, that's pretty exciting. Before, it was kind of dry data and a lot of check marks on a template, and it was evaluation and it was important, but it didn't necessarily drive us further towards an outcome that had a greater impact in our community. You know, you can only go so far in reducing the incidence and impact unless you're going to go further than that. And that's what's been, I think, really key for us is where we ended up aiming became the new paddles on the boat, if you will. And it was like adding an outboard motor. It really was.
Wow. Wow. And Kate, when you were doing this planning for both the AIDS committee and for the neighborhood coalitions, where were you guys aiming? Because normally where we aim is where are our goals over the next couple of years? What do we want to accomplish over the next couple of years? We've got all this data. What do we want to accomplish? Is that where you guys aimed, or were you aiming similar to where Karen was aiming?
No, similar to Karen. And in fact, we ended up with the AIDS Committee, an organization that had been running for 2 decades at that point. We engaged in a whole process to develop a whole new vision statement. And with the Guelph Neighbourhood Support Coalition, we created a vision statement, and it was, as Gail liked to say to us, no, it was our big, what's your word, big, hairy, audacious dream, really, I think, our goal, yeah. And it was way, way out in the stratosphere, as Karen said, and it helped us to, you know, it's helped us to continue thinking in that kind of way in terms of being big and not settling for anything less than greatness.
Do you remember what those vision statements were? Do you remember the gist? You don't have to remember the words. This is not a test.
Well, I think with the AIDS Committee, now I haven't been on that board for 4 years, so I'm going to just say it was dreaming of a time and a place where
Gail's playing Charlie McCarthy. This is great. Gail's moderating.
A place where everyone is free from
live healthy.
Is free to live healthy and vital lives. And with the Guelph Neighbourhood Support Coalition, it was a place created to dream of a place where everyone feels at home. And the feeling at home piece was huge. A lot of discussion from community members because they talked about that was how when you invited someone into your home, what did you do? You offered them tea or a glass of water, or if you had a biscuit maybe, and so that. But you did things to help them feel comfortable and welcome and at home, and that was critical for community members from across the city to have that where everyone feels at home piece in it.
Wow. And I just want to let Mark know, Mark Friesen, I know that you've got a question, and I'm saving it because I've got a great place that I'm going to put it in. So I'm just letting you know that I've got you. I got your back. So one of the questions that is popping for me, you guys are talking about phenomenal vision statements, thriving children, everyone feeling at home, everyone free to live healthy, vital lives. We frequently see those kinds of vision statements at the beginning of a planning session. You know, if you're going to get an award, what's it going to be for? What's different about this planning session that you went through than dreaming that big dream and then getting down to what are we going to do over the next 2 years?
For us, I'll jump in. And you asked early on, Hildy, what's essential, what's required to do this, and I think that's the piece that's really essential. You've got to get that vision piece. You might not have to rewrite the vision statement for your whole organization, but for this planning to work, this approach to work, there's got to be a vision for it. And that really becomes what you wrap everything around. So for us, it was an agency vision. But once we had that, then we worked through what it was going to take to get there. We worked through the conditions that would need to be in place. And it forced us to scrutinize every part of the organization. So the board and governance, both in the mechanical sense, the things that are always on the board agenda, but also the community impact stuff that we want to be on the board agenda, and we want more time for that. All of the operational stuff, the people, the resources, all of it. And we looked at what we had, what strengths could we build on, what don't we have, where are we going to get it? What information will we need? What resources will we need? All aimed at, this is where we're going. There was no question anymore about where we were going. And so we started to see it reflected in our decisions around programming. We started to see it reflected in our, we just recently had to shop for a new home, new physical space. And we looked at the space differently because we had that new vision in mind. There's nothing it hasn't affected, including how we talk about ourselves. So our board, for example, there's no wrong questions anymore. When I first joined this board, there were folks who were new to the board, didn't have a lot of board experience, and I think, you know, as many would be, a little reluctant to jump in and maybe ask a wrong question. There are no wrong questions in this process. There are just better questions and a better fit for the discussion that you have, because the fit now is tied to that vision. It's not tied to anything extraneous. It's not tied to anything that doesn't belong on the agenda because it's got nothing to do with your vision. It's all about your vision. And where we took it was we got Gail to actually, you know, write it all up, and we set priorities. So the board set priorities around, okay, if this is the list of what we need, and if this is how we know we've got these steps to get where we're going, we need to set some priorities around that. And so our community impact plan, which is an actual living, breathing document that Gail will be happy to know we continue to tweak and flex, and we're about to actually develop our next one. It's all about those priorities. It's all about what actions we will take in order to address those priorities. And our first step in putting this new one together was to evaluate how we did on the last one. And our evaluation process started with a summary of what evidence have we seen of our values in action. And that really gave us a list of indicators that are not only things to celebrate and really good benchmarks about how far we've come, but proof positive that we're on the right track, that this plan is workable, and again, there's no wrong steps. There's only different questions. So if it isn't working, or if we haven't made progress in the way we thought, we've now got questions we can ask. It doesn't disappear as a priority. It stays on the community impact plan, but we look at it differently now. It isn't data. It's a condition for our success. And when you look at it that way, you realize you can gather it from a whole host of places we might not have looked before. You can have conversations with people. You think about child abuse, for example, and our closest relationships were with all the people you would have expected: the police, child protection, the medical community, and education. Now, thriving children, when you think about that, who isn't a potential partner? We're out in the community talking to anybody that shares that vision of a thriving community that's created by thriving kids. So we're now picking up information to inform our planning from all kinds of new sources, and benefiting from how they see that information and how they use it. It's a community asset that we can apply to our work, but nobody wrote us a check. It's a completely new kind of resource, and we get to use it and support what we're doing with it. And can you tell we're excited about it?
Just a little bit, because I'm going to have to cut you, because I need to ask Gail. coming out of all of that, I don't want to put a pin in that bubble. What I'd love to know, Gail, listening to Karen just talk about the fact that that everything the organization is doing now is aligned behind that vision. That aligning the internal work, the stuff that we think of as operations, the board, the fundraising, as well as aligning programs and aligning external work, that all of it is aligned behind that vision of what you're trying to create. What I'm curious, Gail, can you share some of the process of the questions that you've asked to first reach for that vision? I know that Susan Detweiler had been asking about the questions as well, and Mark Friesen had been asking about how those questions are prepared. Are you working with board members beforehand to give them a sense of what the questions are and to have their input into what some of the questions are? But I know that there's real curiosity about what are these powerful questions that help folks reach for what's possible and help them align their work behind it.
Sure. First of all, before we carry on, I just want to know, I want people to notice one of the things that Karen just said, which was that they're about to start their second round. And what is so cool about the second round of planning is that they're going to do it. They don't need any special skill sets brought in to do this. They're going to be doing it themselves. They feel such a level of confidence that they now are able to define their own questions. I can't think of anything more amazing in terms of what consultants want, which is the capacity building experience, than that. So now a question about how you create the questions. You can see that one of the things about this process that's so powerful is that it's modeling something and helping, engaging people to model for themselves so that they feel confidence, as Kate was saying, that it's an increase in confidence. So when you think about the questions themselves, well, originally, I kind of had the idea that I was just going to bring all these questions. We do lots of preparation work ahead of time before any moment of being together as a group happens, with the board chair and the senior staff and whoever, the planning committee, whoever that is, to make sure that we're on the right track, that everybody understands what this process is all about, has they're on the same page about what exactly is the pathway going to look like, and what will those questions include. What I've found lately is that I have a general idea of the trend that we're going to take, but when people want to, as Kate said, sometimes people want to go down this rabbit hole or down that side path because it's important to them. And so what we've discovered is that people can really do better work when their anxiety about whether or not the things that are on their mind are going to be on the table. So we even go so far as to make sure that we talk with every single board member ahead of time, that there's a person-to-person interview between myself and every board member, and they always reflect how glad they were that they had that chance, because the things they were worrying about are now on the table. They're in the public domain, as it were, and they can then get on with the rest of the work that's involved. The last thing I'll say is that sometimes the questions aren't big enough, and we certainly had that experience with the AIDS committee. The first pass we took on finding a vision statement, people ended up kind of debating it, thinking, oh, I don't think that fits right. And it was about eradicating HIV/AIDS. And the people were not comfortable with the language, they weren't comfortable with the concept. And what we realized, because of the experience that you brought to the practice, Hildy, was that we just hadn't asked big enough questions. We hadn't gone high enough. And so when we brought it back and said, all right, if we eradicated HIV/AIDS, what would that make possible, and for whom? Suddenly, the time and a place when everybody's free to live healthy, vital lives, it was very obvious. And people said, oh, okay, I see myself in there. That's where I want to be. That's the kind of state I want to live in. So that makes sense to be a good vision.
So in answer to Susan's question, in terms of what kinds of questions can evoke that supreme vision, that simple question that you asked, which is, okay, great, if we eradicate it, and very much like Karen was talking about, eradicating child abuse feels pretty big, but what your experience was, Gail and Kate, that some people didn't feel it was big enough. Eradicating AIDS, okay, that's not really saying it. Just that simple question that you asked, okay, if we do eradicate it, what would that make possible? That opened up the door to everything else.
Yeah, yeah. It's like a tractor beam. If you set your goal high enough, it simply pulls you along into the place you want to go to. There's always one person in every crowd who will say, well, that's just not practical, or that's not realistic, we're never going to do that. But when you help them to think their way through what they want and what it makes possible, eventually they find themselves saying, I think I could live with that. And that's really where you want to help people go. That's where we all want to go.
And I think it really balances, because one of the things that Karen was saying earlier is that it wasn't just establishing that vision, but asking that question, okay, what will it take? And I loved when you said that, Karen, is what will it take for us internally? What will it take externally? Who do we need to partner with? That it made obvious partners that when we were thinking just in terms of money, transactional partners being one thing, but what you were talking about is it opens that what would it take question, opens up the floodgates to all of the different things that it could be.
Absolutely.
Right. Kate, I've got a couple questions for you, because I know that some of the issues that you have dealt with, both with the AIDS Committee and with the neighborhood coalitions, have had to deal with conflict. I know that frequently neighborhood stuff does deal with conflict, because we're living together. And I'm wondering, so often those of us who've done planning and strategy for a long time live under the belief that when there's conflict, what we need is a plan. What we need is a strategy session. What we need is a meeting. I frequently liken it to, the marriage is bad, so what we need is a baby. And I'm wondering, in the situations that you have found where there was some conflict, what did you find about this process that helped bring that conflict, get rid of the conflict and bring people together? Because you guys have really talked a lot about, especially in the neighborhoods, but in both settings, the ability that this process brought people together who had been in conflict before. Can you talk a little bit about what it was about the process that did that? And Gail, if you want to chime in too, because you were there.
Yeah, conflict definitely in both organizations and with both communities. I think I'm not even sure where to begin with some of this. With the AIDS Committee, there was a lot of conflict about how things had been done in the past, and in fact, as I'm thinking about it, the same with the Guelph Neighbourhood Support Coalition and the various different neighborhood groups. So people had been doing things in a way that maybe worked really well at a point in time, but it's my opinion that a lot of that had been outgrown, and it was time to look for new ways. But I think that we're creatures of habit, and we're scared to let go. I don't know, Gail, you're nodding here.
Yeah, for sure.
Let go of the old ways and move into thinking about possibilities. And I think that this process that Gail took both the AIDS Committee Board and first the Guelph Neighbourhood Support Coalition Steering Committee that morphed into a nonprofit board, she helped calm people down and bring out and allow people to express their fears, and then to go on and ask questions in both situations about so what if that wasn't there any longer? What if it's like Karen was saying, all the different questions that we ask around possibilities and reframing. I think for a lot of people that are entrenched in a certain way of thinking, it's really nice to have someone that can reframe the questions into a positive and say, well, that doesn't look so bad to me as an objective outsider. So I think the questions that Gail would ask of both boards, really, and the steering committee at the Guelph Neighbourhood Support Coalition involved reframing and just allowing people to see what had been done and what they were currently doing in a very different way, and that it wasn't negative, it was positive. I don't know, Gail.
Yeah. What kinds of questions are those, Gail? What are those? What kinds of questions reframed out of turning the fear into, okay, what if that wasn't there anymore?
Well, sometimes when you're asking people what sorts of things are important to them, they'll tell you what they don't want. They'll tell you, like Karen said, a community free of child abuse. Well, if you ask them to turn that upside down, to frame it in the positive, or a community where there's no HIV or AIDS, they will easily move that from, it's like prevention to enrichment. They'll move it easily from one to the other, and suddenly it's like a light bulb turns on for them, and they start to realize, oh, okay, now you've moved from what I shouldn't be doing to what's really practical and possible. And asking people to talk about thriving kids, oh, well, we know how to enrich kids' lives. We all know, we have lots of ideas about that. Asking them to describe how you prevent bad things from happening to kids, a whole different kind of experience. And
I think if I could also add that Gail asked people to consider what it would look like. How would you know? That's a really good question that you asked, Gail. How would you know that you've been successful in welcoming everybody in the community? How would you know that you had made people feel like they were at home? How would you know?
What would it look like?
What would it look like? Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really good question, because people can in my experience, people really quickly say, well, it would look like this. They know. They know what the dream is. They know what they're moving towards and what they want. So asking that question is a really important one. What would it look like?
Yeah.
And in our experience, I was just going to say, in our experience, a couple of times we couldn't describe it. We knew what it was, but we couldn't describe it. So we said, here's what it doesn't look like, and then Gail was able to help us flip it and get there just with a different path. So.
And what does that flipping it look like? Because what the people watching want to know is okay, you flipped it. Is Gail magic? Or what was the thing that you did that flipped it, Gail? What was the question that if people couldn't get there and you said, okay, what does it not look like? What was the question that you asked that flipped it for them?
I asked that very question. What would turn it upside down? Turn it on its head now and tell me what, if you shift it from the negative to the positive, what's the positive? And you could literally see people, their body language would change from, the kind of, this is not where we want to be, to, oh, okay, their body would become open, their faces, they would be smiling and saying, oh, that's all we have to do? Oh, okay. That's it. That was all.
It's remarkable, and some of the work that we've done is in the brain chemistry part of that, which is if I am thinking about child abuse, if I am thinking about AIDS, if I am thinking about living in a neighborhood where people are not getting along, that's brain chemistry. It triggers all of those chemicals that make us feel really, really bad. And when I'm even thinking of that in the negative, I don't want child abuse, that doesn't make me feel positive.
All that focuses you on is more child abuse. There's it's what you put your brain on is what you get. So if you want a place where kids are thriving, then keep yourself focused on thriving. If you want, we talked about this with regard to child welfare. Do we want kids who are in a wonderful, happy family environment, or do we want them simply to not be abused?
Yeah. Yes, please, Karen, go ahead.
An important PS, because in our discussions about that higher aspiration thinking, there were fears that by talking about thriving kids and not talking anymore about child abuse, that there would be a price to pay in the community. So we've got this great vision now that is highest potential, thriving children, thriving community. We've got this wonderful mission that has all of our stuff, our programs and everything aligned in that. Our messages are not necessarily any different. Our message, we still talk about the sexual abuse of children. It's the treatment we provide. It's absolutely a problem in the community. But we engage people in those conversations differently because we have a place where we can engage them that is aspirational and not just ugly. And it gives us a whole new lexicon. So and that made it less daunting for board members, for stakeholders, for partners, for our team here. Because we don't ever want to not be, the people who get that message out there. It's a big part of the work we do. But we can do that in a way that engages, and it's a cause and effect thing. If that's what we want as a community, what's it going to take? And you can get people focused on that as a contribution that they can make to that, that ultimate vision. Whereas if you were talking about the sexual abuse of children, people didn't think that there was much they could do other than maybe write a check or come and volunteer on the board. It really opens up possibilities.
Well, and it's not an either or. We cannot have a community where kids are thriving if they're being sexually abused. So it is, in answer to what does it take, one of the things it's going to take is stopping the bad stuff. But what you're talking about is not stopping the conversation there, is to say, okay, and now what? Now what can we create?
Yeah.
Yeah. So can I just add two thoughts about what to share or to strengthen or whatever, reinforce Karen's point. One of the things that I've found consistently in organizations is that we have kind of taught ourselves or people that or we've become accustomed to talking about ourselves in organizations about what we do, and there's a sense of kind of this professional competence that we need not to be questioned about, because people do amazing work, However, I remember in the case of the board with Karen's board, there was a little bit of concern that if we stop talking about what we do, and it was the case in the other situations as well, if we stop focusing on how good we are at what we do, that we're going to risk not having the revenue stream of fundraising and donations that we have had up until now, because well, wait a minute, we can't allow other organizations to take credit for all the good work around, reducing child abuse or whatever, because we're the ones that do that. And so what the conversation as Karen just described, has changed to is actually there's a whole lot more resource in our communities than we were previously willing to pay attention to, because it had to be all about us. And now we can access all sorts of things that help us to achieve that mission, that go way beyond cash. But in fact, on the way, the cash is coming too.
Oh yeah, it resonates with people. It really does. We have relationships now with folks that we didn't know before, and we've engaged them in conversation. We may have engaged them in any number of ways, and they may have become donors or financial supporters, but not because we asked them. Not because we went out and started this new relationship by saying, hi, we're the Community Child Abuse Council and we'd like your money. It's phenomenally helpful to see it reinforced over and over again when you take those first tentative steps in engaging in this new way with people that you don't know and you don't have any grounded relationship with.
So if you're not asking them for money, what are you asking them for? What is the intro salvo?
Initially, let's get to know each other. It starts with a place of commonality, so it's about thriving kids. It's about, maybe say it's the folks in the early childhood development sector who we didn't really know very well, and it's about getting to know each other. And the more we get to know each other, the more we realize what we each bring to those discussions and conversations in the way of strengths and assets. And we learn more about what are you struggling with, and we might be able to help with that. And the next thing you know, you're talking about assets in a way that's very, it's not that transactional, I'll do this for you, you do that for me. It's really aimed at our common vision and our common goals. So therefore, it becomes a win-win, and it feels good from start to finish. And
you're suddenly sharing a mission with people that you didn't think you were sharing a mission with before.
Hadn't thought about it.
I was, you didn't have to point, Gail. I was thinking of Kate. Don't worry.
There's a lot of things resonating here. One of the things that the Guelph Neighbourhood Support Coalition is working really actively to do is to bring community organizations and service providers into neighborhood settings and providing services to neighborhoods that need specific services. And the partner panel, partner organizations, meet bi-monthly, and one of the things that we've started implementing over the past year is a space in those meetings, and we ask these questions. We have we share opportunities to collaborate with other partners or with the Guelph Neighbourhood Support Coalition, supports needed from other partners, and supports or resources that partners might have to offer to neighborhood groups. And so this Christmas, somebody from one of the school boards found out through the University of Guelph about a whole, I don't know how many hundreds of pounds of brand new, not used clothing that were going to be needed to be distributed, and this school board official made sure that that got out to those neighborhoods that needed the clothing for free. There's a number of partners now that are part of the Guelph Neighbourhood Support Coalition that are actively trying to reduce food or increase food sustainability in a number of neighborhoods in Guelph. And for a number of the neighborhoods in this coalition, that's a huge, huge priority and issue. And the Guelph Neighborhood Support Coalition is part of an organization that's planning to create a food hub in the community and just received 3-year funding, $250,000 through a collaboration of about, I don't know, 8 partners, many of that are part of the Guelph Neighbourhood Support Coalition. And these conversations happen with partners and increasingly with neighborhood members around shared tables. And we have a big chart now that is for partners, and they sign in and they say, these are the services that we have to operate or to offer. These may be some of the resources. We have space here that could hold a meeting for 10 people. We have a space that's a boardroom that would be available for neighborhood groups to meet in for free. And the neighborhood groups are now, they've got their own charts. And they're saying, well, we have 4 tables with collapsing legs that we would be happy to let other neighborhood groups borrow. We have a popcorn maker that's really great when you have your community events. We have snowshoes that you could borrow. It goes on and on and on. So these kinds of lists and conversations happen, and I think it goes back to the very beginning of our conversation together about relationships and relationship building. And if there's anything that this process that Gail has involved both of the boards that I've been involved with in, it's about and your conversation about, or your question about conflict, Hildy, it's about getting to know people, it's about having relationships, and that's what Karen said too. And those are the first and foremost things. And if you've got good relationships with people, and you know each other, and you have a better understanding, so Guelph Police Service knows about people in a particularly unsafe community and who the people are there that want to work with the police, it's contagious. It grows, and so it's all about relationships, in my opinion.
I know that you guys are not going to believe this, but we are almost at an hour. I feel like we are just getting warmed up. And so as we're closing here, what I'd like to ask, before I ask for some reflections, because I'm definitely going to ask for what's standing out for you guys, and I would love the folks who have been tweeting. I'm not sure if Mark is tweeting for Vantage Point or Vantage Point is tweeting on their own. Susan is out there, and others. If there are things that are standing out for you, if you want to start tweeting them to the hashtag CTFuture. And if you've got any remaining questions, and obviously if you've got questions, post them to the blog if this is over with, if it's no longer live, and these guys will continue to answer. But the thing that's standing out for me in this is, are there questions that you guys would have experienced that you now use in your day-to-day life, that it doesn't take a planning session, that you can use it when you're just in whatever meeting, whatever strategy, when you're trying to figure stuff out, because planning is nothing more than everybody getting together, thinking together, and making some decisions. So are there questions that you've learned through this process that you're now using in your day-to-day life that folks who are watching can use as well?
I'll start with one. And I'm sure there's many others, but one of the things that I use in many, many meetings with community groups now is Gail's to begin a meeting, and it's very, very powerful, and it's a great way to focus. And it's a go around, and instead of introductions, it's an opportunity to say something that's awesome, that's happened for you or your organization or your organization's work in the community or with the Guelph Neighbourhood Support Coalition. And it is one of the most exciting things to experience, because people go around and hear about what other organizations are doing or what other neighborhood groups are doing, and it's inspiring and it's energizing and it's extremely powerful. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind, Hildy, is what's awesome. Great way to start a meeting.
Cool.
Yep.
How about you, Karen?
We do a lot of kind of stopping and checking ourselves and making sure that we have a very clear why in mind when we it could be talking about anything. We often get stuck on the how, and sometimes when we're really stuck on the how, it's because we're not really clear on the why, or we haven't got a shared why. And by why, I mean that vision piece. So, how are we going to get the parent group brochures done in 11 languages? We can't afford to do that. And why would we do that? And what will that make possible? And for whom? If we take it up a couple of levels and we all agree on what it is we're actually aiming for, it might turn out that we don't have to do parent group brochures in 11 languages, and we would have spent who knows how long talking about that if we hadn't asked that question to get us to that point of agreement. And I've seen this work in so many different contexts, but it's often when you really feel stuck and folks are disagreeing or not in sync, you're not high enough. And you taught me that it's about asking questions that take it up a level until you do get agreement. Now you've got that common ground to work from, and you're all sharing a vision instead of everybody having 6, 8 different ideas about how we're going to do something. The something has to be aimed firmly at a shared aspiration for it to really work. And sometimes what you need to make it happen, that whole idea of the conditions, it's not always a thing. Sometimes it's a way of being. Sometimes it's like one of the things that we're aiming for in our community is a cultural shift about the way people think about the maltreatment of children. That's not a condition that we can go and, we can't buy it, we can't, but it is a condition that's incredibly important to us getting to that place of thriving children. So it isn't always a thing or a tangible. Sometimes it's a way of thinking or a way of being. And those questions about why and the aspirational piece, you've got to have that as an anchor. It's Teflon. It's great.
Well, and it also, as you guys have talked about, it changes what you're bringing people together around. So as you're building relationship, are you building it around something negative? Are you building it around what's possible? And that changes that conversation. Any other questions that are popping for you guys that you would tell folks, here's some powerful stuff that you can use in your everyday life that just resonates for you guys?
So I found that one of the things we, of course, do when we're, especially in a planning context, we always want to get right to the doing, right? We want to start mapping out all the brainstorm ideas and so forth. And often people will say, well, how will we do whatever? Which I have found actually brings us to the same, it kind of grinds you to a halt, because now you're starting with, okay, we've got $50 and maybe we could try. So how often seems to push us to the negative. I don't know why, but it seems to. So changing the wording of that sentence to what would it take, what would we need to know, what would we need to have or be in order, as I'm sort of echoing Karen, but always with this consciousness of what would it take to succeed, as opposed to how are we going to do this. How are we going to do this always seems to get us to disagreement faster than understanding the environment for success, and then taking the steps that we know will work to get us to that goal. So I have found just rewording a question that we all want to think about.
Huge. It's huge. It reminds me of Peter Bloch's book, The Answer to How is Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Any others occurring to you, Kate, before I ask you guys to share what's standing out for you?
I don't. Nothing's. I mean, I think Gail's questions are really the most important, and it's not about how as much as what would it take, and those just tweaking the vocabulary that we use is really important, I think, as well as our approach and our attitude. Instead of feeling like it's a slog and we're never going to get there, it's no, like this is what we want to be. This is where we want to be, and these things are going to help us get there, and these are what we need to be doing as a result. Yeah. So I don't have anything else to add.
Oh, that's more than plenty. As we wrap up, and I really cannot believe how quickly this has gone. I would love to ask you and anyone that is watching, and again, if you're watching this after, if you're watching the recording after we go off the air, please share what is standing out for you. But I would love to ask you guys in this conversation, what has stood out for you?
I think maybe I'll start. I just want to say that as a consultant, one of the things that really is notable to me is that, and I hope people recognize or have heard a little bit, sometimes we think of planning as this static process where you go step by step by step, and you know, it's all about the scanning and the so forth and the data crunching. And my experience has been that the times when the planning process has been the most successful and the most enlivening is when people pay attention to the actual process itself. You know, it's about framing the questions, and it's about how we are with each other, and it's about even sometimes it's about the pace. You know, I've worked with organizations who just want the document, and they want to race to the end, and they miss out on the opportunities that for what they would have learned along the way. And those who describe the results in a way that's joyful, and I worked with Kate's board a couple of months ago as they reviewed just some pieces of their plan for the next, so they could forecast for the next 2 years. Oh my God, the joy, the enthusiasm that was in the room as they were describing how things are different now than they were in 2011 when we did the first plan. It was stunning to think of, and they reflected that because they took the time and they were engaged in the process as well as the outcome. It didn't take any special skills to do that. It doesn't require you to. Anybody could start doing this tomorrow. You don't need to have special technology or special, you know, theories and theoretical analysis. This is a simple thought framework or inquiry framework that we can say works. We know it works.
And I would just add, reflecting on all of this, that one of my first points was about it taking longer, but I think it's really important to understand that a lot of people don't like this because it's messy, and it goes all over the place. It feels like it's messy, and I think we're scared of going into that mess, but if we go into the mess, that's when we build the relationships and we work together best to gain confidence and know that we can manage it on our own, and we don't need to be brilliant rocket scientists that are professionals that have 500 years together of strategic planning experience. It's like anybody can do this, and we just need to be listening and willing, I think, to go there together and have faith that it's all going to work out if we keep at it.
Karen, how about you?
There's a definite theme here. I was going to say what stood out for me was, you know, especially hearing Kate share her experience. It's the great equalizer. This whole process, this journey, anyone can do it. Everyone's involved. That was not always the case, and my experiences of doing it where not everyone was involved felt very different. And you know, at the end of it, it's about sharing more than a business card or a financial sheet, or it's about sharing that vision for something that's really going to change your community. And it doesn't matter whether you're feeding the hungry or, you know, working with kids or helping those with AIDS, or doesn't matter. If it's a community benefit and it's something that we all believe is a good thing, aiming for that and being part of that journey towards that as part of a team that's really ramped up because the vision is clear and the partners are coming out of the woodwork and the messages are strong and they're engaging and they're open. That's such a feel good, and it's ours to take and run with. It really does feel like it was worth every minute, and those shortcuts that you might look for in planning, I don't think they're really shortcuts to anything near as Gail put it, joyful and satisfying and potentially earth-changing for communities. So that's really stood out for me in this conversation. I think that Kate and I have been really fortunate to see that firsthand with the organizations we're involved in. And I attribute a lot of that to Gail, who is absolutely phenomenal at facilitating this stuff, and to that thought framework that and you're right, it's not rocket science. Once you've got it, once you've learned how to apply it, anybody can do it.
It's interesting to hear you say the flip side of both of them. You attribute it to how phenomenal Gail is, and I will acknowledge Gail is pretty phenomenal, but you've both also said that you're now doing this on your own. So, there's beauty in that. I just want to share a couple of observations from the Twitter feed. Jane Garthson is here, and she says, it's lovely to hear how the new vision at Karen's organization opened the door to new partners, sources of information, and more.
Yeah.
Which is wonderful. And Mark Friesen says that what is standing out for him is the importance of relationships and asking what concerns and conflicts look like if they're flipped on their head.
Yeah.
Which is really pretty wonderful. I will share that the thing that's standing out for me is sort of a stream of things, and one is that old adage that if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. Building an amazing future for our communities is far, and it requires going together. I also it is really clear from what you guys are talking about, and Karen, you just hit on it, saying that everything's got to get back to the why. Everything's got to get back to the why. Is that it's not just where you're starting the conversation; it's keeping it there. It is starting the conversation with what is the most important thing? What would our community look like if we're successful? And that is constantly. So it is always the reminder that it's not starting, oh, that's what it would look like. Well, what are we going to do? Because that's unrealistic. And it's keeping it there. So it's keeping that conversation there. And the thing that I'm hearing when I'm listening to you guys is that is the unifying thing that keeps people in relationship. That when we feel crappy, we're crappy to each other, and when we feel good about what we're aspiring to, that we're way better at being in relationship with each other. The one thing that I do want to reframe is, and we hear this frequently, is that these sorts of processes are messy. They are not messy. They are human. We humans are complex creatures. And when there's more than one of us, there's just more complexity. But just like any rich ecosystem has got lots of stuff, we don't call an ecosystem, we don't call a forest messy. We call it beautiful and exactly as it's supposed to be. And we humans are not messy, we're just as we are. And that's pretty wonderful because it allowed me to be with you guys today. So I just want to thank you guys for the work you're doing. And I would also very much appreciate if you will keep us posted on the results that you're seeing in your communities. Because both of you are 2 and 3 years into these processes. It will be wonderful to see what all of those relationships, you already are talking about what it's doing in the neighborhoods, Kate, which is so exciting. But it would be really wonderful to be able to check back a year from now and see, okay, what's different?
Sure thing, Hildy.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
happy to.
Thank you guys for a wonderful conversation, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Jane, and Susan, too.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.